The cafe was a familiar retreat, a quiet corner where the hum of life seemed to slow. I sipped my coffee, watching the steam curl like a dissipating secret. Across from me sat Chris, his expression somewhere between excitement and apprehension. We had been best friends since college, our bond fortified by shared late nights and reckless adventures. But today, there was something different in his demeanor, something fragile. "I need your help," Chris said, breaking the silence. I leaned back, raising an eyebrow. "Help with what? Another prank on your coworker?" Chris chuckled, his laugh rich and warm, but it faded quickly. He hesitated, fingers tracing patterns on the edge of his mug. "No, this is serious. There's someone I like. Really like." My chest tightened, though I forced a smile. "Oh, spill." "His name is Alex. We met at a gallery opening last month." Chris's eyes lit up, his smile unguarded. "He's incredible, smart, confident, ridiculously good-looking. But I don't think he notices me like that." There was the reason for his nervous energy. Chris was rarely uncertain, the kind of person who strode into a room and commanded attention effortlessly. Hearing him this vulnerable made something in me twist, though I couldn't quite name it. "You're asking me for dating advice?" I teased, trying to keep things light. "Kind of," Chris admitted, running a hand through his dark curls. "But more than that, I need you to help me impress him. You know how I can get in my head around people I really like." I nodded slowly. It wasn't a lie. Chris had a tendency to overthink. But beneath my agreement lurked a twinge of unease. "All right, I'll help. What's the plan?" Chris's grin returned, brighter this time. "You're the best. I knew I could count on you." The first time I met Alex, I understood why Chris was smitten. He was magnetic, the kind of person who drew eyes without seeming to notice. We were at a bar Chris had chosen, its dim lighting and low music fostering an intimate atmosphere. Alex arrived fashionably late, sauntering in with the kind of confidence that made me feel instantly self-conscious. He greeted Chris with an easy hug, his smile dazzling. When Chris introduced me as his best friend, Alex's handshake was firm, his gaze steady. "So, you're the famous, your name," Alex said, his voice smooth and melodic. "Famous?" I echoed, glancing at Chris, who was suddenly interested in his drink. "Chris talks about you all the time," Alex continued. "It's nice to finally put a face to the stories." His words were polite, his tone warm, but there was a subtle edge to his smile that unsettled me. I couldn't tell if it was genuine interest or practiced charm. As the evening progressed, I found myself watching Alex more than I intended. He was effortlessly charismatic, the center of attention without trying. Chris, for his part, was radiant, his usual confidence returning in Alex's presence. They flirted openly, laughter punctuating their conversation. Yet, there were moments, fleeting, almost imperceptible, when Alex's attention shifted to me. A lingering glance, a question directed my way, an easy laugh at a joke I didn't think was particularly funny. I dismissed it as politeness, refusing to read into it. This was about Chris, after all. Over the next few weeks, I became an unwilling accomplice in Chris's attempts to win Alex's heart. There were late-night brainstorming sessions, crafting the perfect text messages, and planning casual hangouts where Chris could shine. "Do you think he's interested?" Chris asked one evening as we walked home from a movie. I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "He likes spending time with you." "That's a good sign." Chris nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah, but does he like me? You know, the way I like him?" I didn't have an answer. Alex was hard to read, his charm equal parts inviting and enigmatic. What I did know was that Chris deserved someone who saw him for who he truly was: loyal, kind, and endlessly optimistic. But as much as I tried to focus on helping Chris, I couldn't ignore the growing unease whenever Alex and I interacted. There was something about the way he spoke to me, the way he looked at me, that made it hard to breathe. One evening, Chris invited Alex and me over for dinner. It was meant to be casual, a chance for Chris to showcase his culinary skills, but the air felt heavy with unspoken tension. Alex arrived first, bringing a bottle of wine and a disarming smile. "Hope I'm not too early." "Not at all," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "Chris is in the kitchen. Make yourself at home." Alex wandered into the living room, his eyes scanning the shelves lined with books and trinkets. You have good taste, he remarked, picking up a framed photo of Chris and me from our college days. Thanks. Chris picked most of it, though. Alex set the frame down, his gaze lingering on me. You two have a great friendship. It's rare to find something so solid. His words were simple, but the way he said them made my stomach flip. I looked away, pretending to check my phone. Chris burst into the room moments later, apron-clad and beaming. Dinner's almost ready. Hope you're hungry. The meal was delicious, Chris's excitement infectious as he recounted the effort that went into each dish. Alex praised him generously, their banter light and easy. I should have felt relief, but instead, I felt like an outsider, caught in a dynamic I couldn't quite navigate. As the night wore on, Alex's attention drifted toward me once again. He asked about my work, my hobbies, and my favorite books. His interest felt genuine, but I couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at me. When Chris stepped away to grab dessert, Alex leaned closer, his voice low. You're different from what I expected. I blinked, caught off guard. What do you mean? I don't know. You're real. Grounded. Before I could respond, Chris returned, carrying a tray of desserts and grinning. I hope you saved room. The moment passed, but the weight of Alex's words lingered. As I left that night, walking home alone, I couldn't stop replaying the evening in my mind. Chris was falling hard for Alex, and Alex. I wasn't sure what Alex wanted, but something was shifting, a tension I couldn't ignore. For Chris's sake, I needed to keep my distance, to focus on helping him. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. The lines were already beginning to blur. Days turned into weeks, and what had started as a simple favor for Chris began to feel like walking a precarious tightrope. Alex had become a constant in our lives, joining us for dinners, weekend outings, and even the occasional game night. With each encounter, the dynamic between us grew more complicated. Chris, ever the optimist, was thriving. He confided in me that he felt closer to Alex than ever, convinced that his feelings were being reciprocated. I smiled and nodded, not daring to voice the doubts simmering beneath the surface. One evening, Chris and I were at his apartment, brainstorming ideas for a date he was planning for Alex. Something memorable, Chris said, pacing the living room. Something that shows him how much I care. Maybe keep it simple, I suggested, flipping through a magazine. A picnic, maybe? Somewhere scenic where you can just talk and connect. Chris stopped, considering the idea. That could work. You're good at this, you know. I shrugged, forcing a laugh. Not really. Just trying to help. Before I could say more, Chris's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and grinned. It's Alex. He wants to grab coffee tomorrow. Says he has something important to talk about. I swallowed hard, the knot in my chest tightening. That's great, I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. Chris nodded, his excitement palpable. Yeah, it is. Thanks for being here. By the way, I don't think I could do this without you. His words stung, not because they were untrue, but because they underscored the growing divide between what I was doing for Chris and what I was feeling for Alex. The next day, Alex texted me out of the blue. Hey, are you free this afternoon? I could use some company. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. I should have ignored it. Should have reminded him that my role was to support Chris, not entertain Alex. But curiosity got the better of me, and before I could second-guess myself, I replied. Sure. Where? We met at a park, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the path. Alex was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench with a coffee in hand. Hey, he said, his smile easy and warm. Thanks for coming. Sure, I said, sitting beside him. What's up? He hesitated, his gaze fixed on the horizon. I just needed to clear my head. Things have been complicated lately. I nodded, unsure of what to say. Silence stretched between us, not awkward but heavy with unspoken words. Chris really likes you, I said finally, breaking the quiet. Alex turned to me, his expression unreadable. I know, he's a great guy, but... Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. But I feel like I'm caught in this expectation. Like everyone assumes we're meant to be together. But I'm not sure that's how I feel. The air seemed to shift, the weight of his words settling between us. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Alex met my gaze, his eyes searching mine. I feel more myself when I'm with you. It's like you see me, in a way no one else does. My heart raced, a mix of panic and exhilaration coursing through me. Alex, I know, he said quickly, cutting me off. I know this is complicated, and I know Chris is your best friend, but I can't pretend anymore. His confession hung in the air, and for a moment I didn't know how to respond. This was everything I had feared, everything I had tried to avoid. You can't say things like that, I said finally, my voice trembling. Why not? Alex asked, his tone gentle but firm. It's the truth. Because it's not fair, to Chris, to me, to any of us. Alex leaned back, exhaling slowly. You're right. It's not fair, but it's real. I tried to put distance between us after that, declining Alex's invitations and keeping my interactions with him as brief as possible. Chris, oblivious to the growing tension, continued to confide in me about his plans and dreams for a future with Alex. But avoiding Alex only seemed to make things worse. When we were together, the air crackled with unspoken words, every glance a reminder of what we weren't saying. One evening, Chris hosted a small dinner party at his apartment. Alex was there, of course, his presence impossible to ignore. As the night wore on, I found myself in the kitchen, washing dishes and trying to clear my head. Alex appeared beside me, handing me a plate. Need some help? He asked, his tone casual. I'm fine, I said, keeping my eyes on the sink. He didn't leave, leaning against the counter instead. You've been avoiding me. I sighed, setting the plate down. I'm trying to do the right thing. For who? Alex asked, his voice low. For Chris, I said, turning to face him. He deserves to be happy, and you're part of that for him. Alex shook his head, his expression pained. What about what I deserve? What about what you deserve? Before I could respond, Chris appeared in the doorway, his smile faltering as he took in the scene. Everything okay? He asked, his gaze flicking between us. Yeah, I said quickly, stepping away from Alex. Just finishing up here? Chris nodded, but his eyes lingered on Alex for a moment longer. All right, come join us when you're done. As he walked away, I felt a sinking sense of dread. The lines were blurring, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't keep things from unraveling. By the time I left that night, I knew things couldn't go on like this. The tension between Alex and me was becoming impossible to ignore, and Chris's faith in me was a weight I could no longer carry. As I walked home, the city lights flickering around me, I felt the full weight of the situation pressing down. I had stepped into this thinking I could help Chris, thinking I could be the friend he needed. But somewhere along the way, I had lost sight of the boundaries, and now I was caught in a web of emotions I couldn't untangle. Something had to give, and soon. The tension finally broke one quiet evening. Chris called me, his voice brimming with enthusiasm, asking me to meet him at a small cafe downtown. The air outside was crisp, and as I arrived, I saw him waiting at a corner table, his usual buoyant smile in place. I've got great news, Chris said as I sat down. Alex and I are finally going on an actual date. Dinner this weekend. I froze, my stomach twisting. That's great, I managed, forcing a smile. Chris leaned forward, his hands gripping his coffee cup. It's all thanks to you. You've been amazing through this whole thing. I don't know what I'd do without you. His words hit like a punch. Guilt surged through me, sharp and unrelenting. I had spent weeks helping him, all while battling feelings for the very person he was falling for. But this was what I wanted, wasn't it? For Chris to be happy? Of course, I said quietly. I'm glad it's working out. Chris beamed, oblivious to the turmoil within me. I excused myself soon after, needing to escape before I said something I couldn't take back. That weekend, I stayed in, determined to avoid any reminders of Chris's date with Alex. I buried myself in work, ignoring texts and calls until I heard a knock at my door late that evening. When I opened it, Alex stood there, rain-soaked and breathless. What are you doing here? I asked, stunned. We need to talk, he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I shut the door, my heart racing. Alex, you shouldn't be here. You're supposed to be with Chris. I couldn't do it, he said, his voice raw. I couldn't sit there and pretend. Not when I feel this way about you. The room seemed to shrink, the weight of his words pressing in from all sides. This isn't fair, I said, my voice trembling. To Chris, to us. None of this is fair. I know, Alex said, his eyes pleading. But I can't ignore it anymore. Every time I'm with him, I'm thinking about you. Every word, every look, it's you. It's always been you. I turned away, the ache in my chest unbearable. You don't understand what you're asking of me. I'm asking you to be honest, Alex said, his voice steady. With yourself. With me. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. This isn't just about us. Chris is my best friend. I can't hurt him like this. Alex stepped closer, his hand brushing mine. And what about you? What about what you want? For a moment, I let myself imagine it. A world where things were simpler, where I could choose Alex without consequence. But reality came crashing back, sharp and unforgiving. I can't do this, I whispered, pulling away. You need to leave. Alex hesitated, his expression torn. But finally he nodded, his shoulders slumping in defeat. I'm sorry, he said softly, before walking out the door. The next day Chris called, his voice tight. We need to talk. I met him at the park, the air heavy with impending confrontation. He stood by a bench, his posture rigid, his eyes unreadable. Alex told me everything, he said as I approached. My stomach dropped. Chris, He held up a hand, cutting me off. Don't. I just need to know one thing. Did you feel the same way? I hesitated. The truth caught in my throat. But Chris deserved honesty, even if it shattered what we had. I didn't want to. I tried not to. But yes, I did. Chris's face crumpled, a mix of betrayal and hurt flashing in his eyes. Why didn't you tell me? Because it didn't matter, I said, my voice breaking. You're my best friend, Chris. I didn't want to ruin that. Well, congratulations, he said bitterly. It's ruined anyway. I reached for him, desperate to salvage something. Chris, please. Don't, he said, stepping back. I trusted you. And you kept this from me? I watched as he walked away, each step a reminder of what I had lost. Weeks passed, and the void left by Chris's absence was unbearable. Alex tried reaching out, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I needed time, space to figure out who I was without the people who had defined so much of my life. Eventually, I found myself back at the cafe where it had all begun. The air was quieter now, the hum of life moving on without me. Chris walked in, his expression guarded. He spotted me and hesitated, but eventually, he approached. Hey, he said, his voice tentative. Hey, I replied, my heart aching at the distance between us. He sat down, his gaze fixed on the table. I've been thinking a lot about everything. About us? Chris, I'm so sorry, I said, my voice trembling. I never meant to hurt you. I know, he said, meeting my eyes. But it doesn't change what happened. I nodded, accepting the weight of his words. I want you to know that you mean everything to me. And I hate that I messed this up. Chris sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know if we can go back to how things were. But maybe we can figure out a new normal. Tears filled my eyes as I nodded. I'd like that. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. And as we sat there, talking quietly, I felt a glimmer of hope that someday we might find our way back to each other.